My daughter, I have a confession for you before I die.
What is that, Mom?
I gave you 20 years from my age for you to live.
Nurse! Nurse, please help! My mom is not breathing! I'm on it! Calling the doctor now! Doctor in room 12, stat!
Take my years. Give them to my daughter. If you are reading this, then you have already been through the fire. And I am sorry I couldn't.
This is not a story you can afford to miss.
I'm dying.
Come and watch with me what they called motherly love. Wait, what if the one person who kept you alive was already dead? What if your mother, the woman who carried you, fed you, fought for you, made a trade so painful, so permanent, so completely driven by love that she never once told you about it because she knew that if you found out, the guilt alone would break you? What if she chose to carry that secret all the way into her grave? And what if the only thing standing between you and death was just one simple visit every third day of every month? Just show up. Just stand there. Just remember. For 7 years, Adaeze kept that promise without fail. Then, one evening, a man she trusted completely, a man whose voice felt like safety, whose smile felt like home, sat across her at her own dining table and told her gently, lovingly, convincingly that her mother's dying wish was nothing but the fear of a grieving woman. And Adaeze believed him. She should not have believed him. Because that man knew what he had always known from the very first day he walked back into her life with that wide smile and those 2 cups of zobo drink would shatter everything she thought she understood about love, betrayal, and the price a mother pays when the world offers her an impossible choice. Stay with this story until the end. Not because of the curse, not because of the fire, not even because of the betrayal. Though that betrayal will make your blood run cold. Stay because of the letter. When Adaeze reads that letter, when she finally understands what her mother actually did for her, you will need a moment to collect yourself. The last thing Adaeze's mother said to her was not "I love you." It was a warning. It was a Thursday evening in Lagos, the kind of evening where the sky turns the color of burnt palm oil and the air carries the weight of rain that never arrives. Mama Ngozi lay on a narrow hospital bed in Lagos Island General Hospital, her breathing shallow, her fingers ice cold despite the thick August heat pressing flat against every window in the ward. Adaeze was 22 years old. She had been sitting in that same plastic chair beside the bed for 3 days straight, not eating properly, not sleeping, not leaving except to use the bathroom at the end of the corridor. She had been praying continuously to every version of God she had ever encountered. The church God, the quiet God of her grandmother's early morning whispers, the ancestors whose names she did not know but called anyway because desperation does not wait for introduction. None of them had answered, or so she thought. Adaeze. Her mother's voice came out like dry leaves dragged slowly across concrete. Barely a sound, more of a texture than a word. But Adaeze heard it the way you hear thunder, not just with your ears, but with your entire chest. I am here, Mama. I am right here. Mama Ngozi turned her head slowly against the thin pillow. Her eyes were glassy but sharply focused. And that focus was the thing that frightened Adaeze most. A dying woman's eyes should be confused, drifting, letting go. Her mother's eyes were doing none of those things. They were locked on Adaeze's face with an urgency that felt almost violent. Listen to me, Mama Ngozi whispered, and do not interrupt. There is not much time, and what I have to tell you is not small. Adaeze nodded. Her throat was too tight for words. When you were 3 years old, her mother began, you became very sick. Not ordinary sick. The kind of sick that the doctors here in Lagos spread their hands about and say there is nothing they can do. You are leaving me, Adaeze. My baby was leaving me and I was sitting in a hospital chair just like the one you are sitting in now, watching it happen. Adaeze felt something shift in her chest. I could not accept it. Mama Ngozi continued. So I went to Badagry, to a woman the old people called Mama Adaeze, a shrine keeper. I am not telling you this for you to judge me. I am telling you because you need to understand what was done and why. She paused to breathe. The machine beside the bed beeped steadily. Mama Adaeze told me your life could be saved, but nothing in this world or the next world is free, my daughter. The price was this. I would give years from my own life to fill the ones being taken from yours. Every year I gave would shorten my own time on this earth. I did not hesitate. I gave 20 years, willingly, gratefully, and you recovered within the week. The world was completely silent except for the machines. You are always supposed to grow old, Adaeze. I made sure of that. But because the trade involved ancestral energy, a life force that passed from my body into yours, it created something between us, a thread, invisible but real. When I am gone, that thread will be the only thing still connecting your life to the protection I paid for. She gripped Adaeze's hand with strength that had no business existing in a dying woman's fingers. The grave visits are how you keep that thread alive. Every third day of every month, you come to my grave and you stand there. You do not need to bring anything. You do not need to say anything complicated. Your presence alone tells the ancestors that the trade is still honored, that the life I bought for you is still being lived and remembered. As long as you come, the protection holds. And if I miss, Adaeze whispered. Mama Ngozi's eyes did not waver. 1 missed visit weakens the thread. 2 missed visits and it begins to unravel. 3 missed visits and the life that was borrowed must be returned. She paused. But that is not the only danger. There is a family, I will not speak their full name here, whose grandfather went to Mama Adaeze before I did, asking for the same trade. She refused him. She gave the power to me instead. That family has never forgiven this. They have been watching us ever since, waiting for the thread to break so they can take what was never given to them. The machines began beeping faster. Adaeze, they will send someone who knows your heart, someone you will trust, and they will use that trust to pull you away from the grave. Her voice dropped to almost nothing. Promise me you will not let them. Promise me you will come every third day without fail. The lights in the ward flickered once, then twice. Promise me, Adaeze. The whole world compressed itself into that one sentence. I promise you, Mama Ngozi. I promise you. Mama Ngozi closed her eyes. She died 47 minutes later at 11 minutes past 9 while the night nurses changed shifts in the corridor outside and Lagos continued roaring beneath the hospital windows, completely indifferent. They buried her at a Koyi cemetery beneath a neem tree whose thin leaves fell like quiet tears on the fresh earth. Adaeze stood at the graveside in a white dress already soaked through with August heat, surrounded by weeping aunties and stiff uncles and neighbors who brought rice she would never touch. She did not cry that day. She was already counting. The 3rd day of the following month fell on a Tuesday. Adaeze arrived before sunrise, standing at the grave with folded hands, while commercial buses roared past the cemetery gates and a malam swept the road outside with long, patient strokes. She brought nothing. She said nothing elaborate. She simply came as promised and stood in the grey Lagos morning until she felt something settle quietly inside her chest. She came the month after, and every month after that. For 7 years, Adaeze did not miss a single visit. Her fabric business grew from a single market stall in Balogun Market to a proper shop in Surulere with 3 staff members. She had a clean apartment in Gaba with tomatoes growing stubbornly in plastic buckets on the balcony. She had her health, her peace, and a steady, quiet happiness she protected fiercely. She had kept her promise. The protection had held. Until the morning Chidi walked back into her life, carrying 2 cups of Zobo drink and wearing the most convincing smile she had ever seen on a human face. She had known Chidi since university, the kind of person who filled every room he entered, who remembered your birthday without being reminded, who showed up at your door with food when you were sick and never once made it feel like an obligation. They had been genuinely close during their campus years at UNUAG, then drifted apart the way young Lagos people always do, life scattering everyone like seeds thrown into harmattan wind. He reappeared on a Saturday morning, 6 months ago, standing in the doorway of her Surulere shop with those 2 cups of Zobo and that wide, uncomplicated grin, acting like no time had passed at all. Adaeze, you look like success itself. She laughed despite herself. She should have paid attention to the fact that she laughed despite herself, that her instincts were already noting something her emotions were choosing to ignore. He came back the following Saturday, and the one after that. Within 3 months, he was the first person she called when something good happened. Within 5 months, she had told him about the grave visits, about her mother's oath, about the 3rd day, about the 7 years of early morning cemetery trips while Lagos slept around her. She remembered now, sitting in her car outside his empty Lekki apartment weeks later, that something had moved across his face when she told him. Quick, controlled, gone before she could properly identify it. She had not identified it then as recognition. She would not forget
but it
it
makes
now.
no sense.
The 3rd day of October fell on a Friday that year. Adaeze had circled it in her calendar in red pen the way she always did. Small circle, no label, no explanation needed. She had never needed one. That Thursday evening, Chidi arrived at her apartment with his laptop, 2 takeaway bags from a suya spot on Awolowo Road, and a business proposal spread across printed documents that covered her entire dining table. There is a serious investor, he said, his voice carrying the particular energy of someone delivering genuinely exciting news. A man who has been watching your fabric brand quietly for months. He is in Lagos only until Saturday morning. Tomorrow is the only window to meet him. Adaeze looked carefully at the papers. The numbers were the kind that could move her business from Surulere to Victoria Island within 2 years. The kind of numbers that meant something real. Tomorrow is the 3rd, she said quietly. Chidi looked up. Sorry? The 3rd day of the month. I visit my mother's grave this morning. A pause. Something crossed his face, brief and controlled as always. Then the warmth returned, slower this time, deliberately gentle. Adaeze. His voice dropped to the register she had come to associate with his most sincere moments. Your mother was dying. She was in tremendous pain. She was a woman who loved you more than her own life. And that love in her final moments came out as fear. Fear of leaving you unprotected. What she told you that night came from that fear, not from truth. He paused. You have been carrying this for 7 years, Adaeze. You have cancelled meetings, you have turned down opportunities, you have organized your entire life around a cemetery visit that was born from a dying woman's terror of losing her daughter.
He looked at her steadily. At what point do you choose your living life? Silence filled the apartment. Outside, a neighbor's generator cut off suddenly and the street plunged into the kind of deep Lagos darkness that makes the world feel very small. What Chidi said next was the most dangerous sentence of the entire evening. Your mother, the real her, the version who raised you and sacrificed everything for you, she would never want this life for you. It was the perfect thing to say. It was so perfectly constructed that Adaeze would spend weeks afterward turning it over in her mind, marveling at how precisely it had been aimed. Because he had never met Mama Ngozi. He had never heard her laugh, or watched her pray, or seen the specific way she looked at her daughter. He had absolutely no basis for knowing what Mama Ngozi would or would not want. And yet, he spoke about her with the quiet confidence of someone who had already decided what the answer needed to be. Adaeze did not notice this. Not yet. She put on her best dress the following morning and went to the investor meeting. The man was real. The proposal was real. The conversation was warm and promising, and he said all the right things about her brand's potential. Chidi sat beside her through the entire meeting, attentive and supportive, squeezing her hand under the table when the investor said something particularly encouraging. After lunch, he spoke about their future. Their future combined as though it had already been decided and just needed to be lived into. Adaeze smiled and nodded and raised her glass. But something inside her chest felt like a door she had closed behind her and heard distantly lock from the inside. She told herself it was anxiety about the opportunity. She told herself one missed visit could not matter that much. That night, she dreamed of her mother standing at Ikoyi cemetery gate in a white wrapper. Not angry, not reaching for her, just watching from a distance with an expression that looked unbearably, unmistakably like goodbye. She woke at 3 a.m. in the morning to her phone ringing. It was her Surulere shop manager. Madam, the shop, there is fire. By the time Adaeze arrived, the flames were mostly out. A generator fault, people said. The entirely ordinary Lagos kind that happened somewhere in the city every single night. But the damage was severe. 2 walls destroyed, half her fabric stock gone. The new sewing machines she had bought in September reduced to blackened metal. She stood in the smoke-thick night and stared at the ruins of 5 years of careful work and felt for the first time in 7 years the heaviness. It settled over her not dramatically, but completely. The way fog settles over Lagos Lagoon in early morning, slowly, until you cannot remember what breathing felt like without it pressing on your chest. She called Chidi.
Chidi, please pick
He
the
did
call.
not
I'm
answer.
dying.
The
Chidi,
investor's
Please,
formal
I'm begging
offer
you.
never arrived. By the following Wednesday, Chidi's phone was routing every call directly to voicemail. By Friday, his Lekki apartment, the one he had shown her photos of, the one he had promised to take her to see soon, very soon, was completely empty. The landlord at the gate said the tenant had packed out 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. Before the meeting, before the proposal, before he had sat at her dining table in the soft candlelight, holding her hand and telling her that her mother's dying wish was nothing more than a frightened woman's fear. Adaeze sat in her car outside that empty building for a very long time. The Lagos afternoon pressed down on everything without mercy. A keke napep rattled past. A woman walked by with a tray of ripe plantain balanced perfectly on her head, entirely unbothered. Life in this city does not pause for private devastation. It never has, and it never will. She drove to Auntie Chioma in Mushi. Mama Ngozi's oldest friend was 73 years old, small and still sharp as broken glass. She opened her front door, looked once at Adaeze's face, and said 4 words without any surprise at all.
You are already
so
seeing the
it
bad
has
side,
started.
right?
Yes, I see
She
it
stepped
now.
back to let Adaeze inside. The sitting room smelled of camphor and old wood and something sweeter underneath, the particular smell of a home that has been loved in for decades. Photographs covered every available wall. Adaeze recognized her mother in several of them, young, laughing, wearing dresses that belonged to a Lagos that no longer existed. They sat across each other over cups of tea that went cold untouched, while Auntie Chioma spoke.
Your mother came to me the week before she died. Auntie Chioma began. She gave me 2 things. The first was a name, a family name I was to watch for. The second was a letter, sealed. She told me. Auntie Chioma paused, her voice careful. She told me to give the letter to you only when you came to me broken, not before. She was very specific about this. She said you needed to experience the loss first. Otherwise, you would read it as a story about someone else. But if you came to me the way you are sitting now, then you would read it as your own life, and you would finally understand what was done for you. She stood slowly, walked to the back of the room, and opened an old tin box on the highest shelf. She returned with a folded envelope, cream-colored, slightly yellowed at the edges, sealed with candle wax. Adaeze's name written on the front in her mother's unmistakable handwriting. Adaeze's hands were not steady when she took it. She read the letter twice. The first time, her eyes moved too fast, swallowing words whole, not processing. The second time, she read each sentence slowly, out loud in a whisper, as if the words needed to be heard by more than just her eyes. Her mother had written everything. The night in Badagry, the shrine, Mama Eze's weathered face in the lamplight, the diagnosis that the doctors at Lagos Island Hospital had delivered with spread hands and empty faces. We are sorry, there is nothing more we can do. The 3-year-old Adaeze with her thin arms and her closing eyes, the baby who had been living and simply could not be allowed to live. Betrayed. 20 years of Mama Ngozi's own life, given willingly, without hesitation, signed into the ancestral record the way a contract is signed, permanently and without possibility of reversal. I want you to understand, her mother had written, that I did not feel I was losing anything. I felt I was making the only sensible investment available to me. What is 20 years of my life compared to yours? What is any portion of my years compared to you? You are 3 years old and you had not yet laughed enough, or loved enough, or seen enough of this world. I had already had 22 beautiful years. The arithmetic was simple. Adaeze pressed the letter against her chest and stared at the ceiling. She breathed. She kept reading.
Her mother had written about the thread, the invisible ancestral connection that the trade created, that the grave visits maintained, that one missed visit had already begun to weaken. She had written about the family in careful, measured words, a family whose patriarch had approached Mama Adaeze before Mama Ngozi arrived that night in Badagry, seeking the same power for darker purposes and been refused. A family that had watched the Ngozi household for 2 decades, waiting for the thread to break. And at the very bottom of the letter, in handwriting slightly different from the rest, written separately, perhaps later, perhaps with a shakier hand, they will send someone you love, Adaeze. That is always how they work. They study you first. They find the door in your heart that is most open. Then they send someone through it. By the time you realize what has happened, the door will have already been used. I could not tell you his name because I did not know which face they would choose, but I knew they would come. I am so sorry. I could not protect you from this part. Go back to the grave, my daughter. It is not too late. The thread is weakened, but it is not broken. Go back and stand there and let them know the trade is still honored. Let them know my daughter is still living the life I paid for. And know, every single time you came faithfully for 7 years, you were not only protecting yourself. Every 3rd day you showed up, I felt it. I was at peace because of you. You have been blessing me all along without knowing. My love for you has no bottom and no ending. Your mama.
Auntie Chioma said nothing when Adaeze finally put the letter down. She simply moved to the sofa beside her and held her the way old women in Lagos hold the people they love, firmly, without words, without trying to make the pain smaller than it actually is. Adaeze cried in a way she had never cried before. Not the desperate, drowning tears from the cemetery. Something deeper. Something that had been sealed inside her since she was 22 years old, sitting in a plastic hospital chair, watching her mother's focused eyes and not understanding what she was really seeing. She had been looking at a woman who had already given everything and had never once asked for anything back. Adaeze did not sleep that night. She lay in her Yaba apartment, listening to Lagos breathe outside, distant music from a party, the long horn of a night bus somewhere on the mainland, the low, faithful hum of generators holding back the darkness. Ordinary sounds, city sounds, the sounds of millions of lives continuing forward, indifferent to what moved quietly beneath the surface of things. She held the letter against her chest in the dark and thought about her mother. Not the dying version, not the hospital version with the cold hands and the urgent eyes. The living version, the woman who woke at 4 every morning to pray before anyone else in the building was awake. The woman who could stretch a small pot of egusi soup across 3 days without it ever tasting like it was being stretched. The woman who sat on the edge of Adaeze's bed during thunderstorms when Adaeze was small and afraid, not saying anything, just being there, her solid warmth making the thunder irrelevant. The woman who walked into a shredding in Badagry at the lowest point of her life and said, without drama, without negotiation, without looking for another option, "Take my years, give them to my daughter. I have made my decision." 20 years, gone before Mama Ngozi turned 50. Gone so that Adaeze could sit on this bed, in this apartment, in this city, breathing, living, growing tomatoes on a balcony, running a business, loving the wrong person and surviving it. Adaeze thought about Chidi. She thought about how precise it had all been. His reappearance timed perfectly for when she was successful enough to have something to lose. His patience across 6 months of friendship designed to make her trust feel earned. His words at the dining table crafted so expertly that even now, knowing everything, she could hear them in her mind and understand why they had worked. He had studied her completely before he made his move.
He had found the exact door in her heart that was most open, and she had unlocked it herself and invited him through. The most painful part of betrayal is never the betrayer. It is the memory of your own willingness. She fell asleep near dawn with the letter still held against her chest, and in the thin space between waking and sleep, she felt something. Brief and warm and completely specific, the way only one person in the world had ever felt, settle beside her for just a moment. She did not see anything. She did not hear anything. She simply felt her mother. And then the feeling was gone. And Lagos morning was coming through her curtains, and she already knew exactly where she was going. On the 3rd day of November, the first 3rd day after everything, Adaeze arrived at Ikoyi Cemetery before the gates officially opened. The security man at the entrance saw her coming and unlocked the gate without a word. He had been watching this woman arrive on the same days every month for 7 years. He knew her car, he knew her walk. He simply nodded and stepped aside. The neem tree was where it always was. The grave was where it always was. The stone marker with her mother's name, the small concrete border Adaeze paid to build in the 2nd year, the patch of dry grass that always seemed drier than the grass surrounding it, regardless of season. The Lagos skyline was visible in the distance above the cemetery walls, cranes and rising buildings against a sky that had not yet decided what color it wanted to be that morning. Adaeze knelt on the ground beside the grave. She placed both palms flat on the concrete border and felt the cool stone beneath her hands and breathed. "I broke the promise, Mama." Her voice was steady. She had decided on the drive here that she would not come with excuses or carefully constructed explanations. Just truth. "I read your letter. I know now what you gave. I know what these visits actually mean, and I know what was at stake. And I still broke the promise. I was deceived, yes, but part of me wanted someone else to be right. Part of me was tired of being the girl who goes to the cemetery while everyone else sleeps in on their days off. I wanted to be free of it. And I chose the most expensive possible way to learn that some promises are not chains. Some promises are the ground you stand on." She stopped. A bird landed on the neem tree above her, sat completely still. "I am back, Mama. I am standing here. I am telling the ancestors that the trade is still honored, that your daughter is still living the life you paid for, and she does not take a single day of it lightly anymore." The morning held itself very still, and then it happened, the thing she would spend the rest of her life trying to find words for and always failing. The air around the grave shifted, not dramatically, not like anything from a film, just a subtle, complete change. The way a room feels different when someone who loves you walks into it before you even turn around to see them. Brief, warm, absolutely unmistakable. Her mother. And then, just Lagos morning again. Bus horns in the distance, a rooster somewhere beyond the cemetery wall, and the city's endless forward noise. Adaeze pressed her forehead against the stone marker and wept quietly, and when she was finished weeping, she stood up, straightened her dress, and walked back to her car. Rebuilding took the better part of a year. The Surulere shop was restored slowly and methodically, one wall at a time, one machine per month, her staff steady and loyal throughout. Her customers returned, some bringing new ones, because in Lagos, reputation is the only currency that never loses its value, and people remember
who stands back up. The heaviness did not disappear immediately. She felt it sometimes at the edges of her days, the faint residue of one broken promise, like a healed bone that still knows when rain is coming. But it did not take anything more from her. She went to the grave on the 3rd day of every month without exception, and each time she came, the heaviness was a little lighter, the thread a little stronger, the sense of her mother's peace a little more tangible. In February, she arrived at the grave one morning to find fresh flowers already placed on the stone. Simple yellow flowers she did not recognize, still fresh, placed by hands she could not identify. She stood looking at them for a long time. She never found out who left them. She decided the universe had placed them there. A small, wordless acknowledgement of a daughter who had stumbled, found her footing, and refused to stop walking. She heard about Chidi the way news always travels in Lagos, through someone who heard it from someone who heard it from someone else, passed along in lowered voices over phone calls and across market stores. His logistics company had completely collapsed. There were significant debts. His family, the one whose name Auntie Chioma had spoken quietly and not repeated, had experienced a series of compounding misfortunes that people in their neighborhood had begun to speak of in the careful language people use when they believe something more than coincidence is involved. Adaeze did not feel the satisfaction she might have expected when she heard this. She felt grief. Grief for the version of Chidi that had never existed. The man with the wide, warm laugh who remembered birthdays and arrived with food when you were sick. That man had been entirely constructed, a character worn over a mission like a costume. But she had loved him genuinely. And genuine love does not require its object to be real in order for genuine love to be real. It stays. It aches quietly. It teaches you things about your own heart that nothing else could have revealed. She forgave herself slowly, the way the body heals from a deep wound, not all at once, not in a single dramatic moment, but in small daily increments that you only notice when you look back at where you started. On the last evening of that year, Adaeze sat on her Yaba balcony, watching the sun dissolve into the Lagos horizon. That specific burning orange that belongs only to this city at this hour. The color that turns every rooftop and water tank and half-finished building briefly, impossibly golden before the night comes. Her tomatoes were growing along the railing, stubborn, green, completely indifferent to everything that had happened in the past months. Just growing, because that is what living things do when they are tended. She held her mother's letter in her lap. She had read it so many times now that the folds were soft as fabric, and she knew entire passages by heart. What is 20 years of my life compared to yours? She thought about a young woman walking into a shrine in Badagry with nothing but desperation and that specific fierce love that mothers carry like a second heartbeat. Walking in and offering the most valuable thing she owned without looking back once. She thought about 7 years of faithfulness that had blessed her mother's rest on the other side without her ever knowing it. She thought about one terrible evening of doubt and the fire that followed, and the letter that explained everything, and the morning she had returned to the grave and felt briefly and completely that she was not alone. "Thank you, Mama," she said to the orange sky, to the city, to whatever remained of a thread woven from 20 years and one mother's impossible love. Lagos roared beneath her, messy, brilliant, relentless, completely alive.
A million lights blinked on across the skyline, one by one, like answers to questions nobody had finished asking yet. Adaeze sat inside all of it, unbroken, still here, still living the life her mother paid for. The third day would come again. She would be there. She would always be there. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, like, comment and share it, because the best African folktales were never meant to be heard alone. And don't forget to subscribe to receive more African stories like this from Mafia Folklore Tales. Bye!